Are you paying enough in taxes to support the wasteful federal government? Are you paying too much? How much is fair? Well, that's one of the big issues of this election year. Take a look.
On the campaign trail, President Obama and Mitt Romney have laid out very different economic philosophies. Romney's idea is to cut tax rates to grow the economy.
The job of the government as it relates to the economy is to make America the most attractive place in the world for entrepreneurs and innovators, investors, job creators.
The linchpin of the president's economic vision is to make the wealthiest of Americans pay their fair share in taxes.
I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot, when everyone does their fair share, when everyone plays by the same rules.
But what constitutes fairness when it comes to the economy? Does it mean demanding that the wealthiest Americans pay more? Does it mean a government that takes from the rich and gives to the poor? In his new book, Who's the Fairest of Them All?, author Stephen Moore answers those questions with a strong defense of the free market system as the path to success and achievement.
You need to read this book. I found it very insightful, very interesting. Stephen Moore, very insightful author and economist, and he's here with us right now. And Stephen, it's good to welcome you back to the 700 Club. Can I ask you, where did Obama get all this fairness stuff? Where did it come from in his background?
Well, first of all, the president can't run on his economic record, right? I mean, it's been an incredibly dreadful economic record. We still have incredibly high unemployment, about 15% if you measure the people who can't find a full-time job or given up. We've had, well, you know, the last 3 months were 1.3% growth. And by the way, Pat, that compares with President Reagan. At this juncture of his presidency, we had 8% growth. So the economy was growing about 4 or 5 times faster than it is now. We have this enormous debt. I'm sure you saw the statistics that came out last week. Officially, our national debt rose by another $1.1 trillion last year. And you know something sad about that, Pat? That $1.1 trillion, that was an improvement over the year before. And so President Obama, because of the dreadful record, is running on this agenda of fairness, creating a fair society. That was the motivation for my writing this book. And what I point out is, look, the fairest system of them all, the system, Pat, you know this, that creates the most wealth, the highest income, the most opportunity for the vast majority of Americans is the free enterprise system. And I'm very concerned, Pat, as I know you are, that America is moving away from that free enterprise system towards a system of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, and that's never worked anywhere.
Stephen, we're running, as you said, a $1.1 trillion deficit. We're borrowing it from China. 30% of all the money we're spending, we're borrowing.
Right.
Let me ask you, if the government confiscated the income of all the rich people that he's talking about, the millionaires, the billionaires, the whatever, people that have more than $1 million in income, they confiscated it all, 100%. How many days would that run the government?
Well, first of all, Pat, please don't give Barack Obama any ideas. I mean, they're not so far from confiscating all the wealth from the rich people. But, you know, you can only run the government by 30 or 60 days, even if you took every single penny that these people who are the millionaires and the billionaires make. And the reason for that, Pat, is America is still a middle-class country. The most Americans and most of the income in this country sits in the pockets of the middle class. And that's why I'm very worried that if Barack Obama is reelected, it's not just going to be the tax rates on the rich go up. That will be the first step. But then the government's going to say, oh, we didn't get enough money from this. We're going to have to go to people make, you know, 100,000, then 75,000, then 50,000. So, you know, as Paul Ryan said very cogently in that debate against Joe Biden, which, by the way, Paul Ryan won, he basically said, look, when they talk about soaking the rich, middle class, guard your wallet because they're coming after you next.
What is middle class now? It used to, I mean, we've had various definitions. What is the cutoff on middle class?
Well, you know, nobody knows for sure. I like to define middle class as anyone with an income of between about $40,000 and $100,000 a year, Pat. And those are people who are, you know, struggling to make ends meet. They are people usually, well, oftentimes with 2 earners in the family, a husband and a wife both working. But, you know, we have a vast middle class in this country. And you know, one of the things that I really worry about is all this preoccupation with equality. You know, what we want in this country, and this is the point of my book, we want equality of opportunity. We want every American, you know, whatever their race or whatever their background or whatever their ethnicity, we want every American to have an opportunity to succeed in this great country of ours. But we don't want equality of outcome. I mean, my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, if you want equality of outcome, go to Cambodia. You know, they have equality of outcome. Everybody's poor. And so this is, I think, the point of the book is how do we create a society, Pat, where everyone can fulfill their destiny? And by the way, I think that one of the highest calling is to start a business and to employ people. And those are the people who President Obama wants to tax.
You pointed out in the early parts of this book about what happened in the New England colony. How did they organize that initially, and then what did they change it to?
Yeah, this is a great story that a lot of Americans aren't aware of. But when America was first founded, one of the first economic organizing principles that we tried was socialism, where we basically said everybody's going to produce and we're going to share everything that is produced and we're going to get the most output. And what happened, Pat, as a result of that socialist model was the colonists and the pilgrims almost starved to death because everybody sat around and said, I'll let somebody else produce. And so it wasn't until we moved away from that socialistic model towards a model that said, look, you get to, if you produce something, if you work hard, if you start a business, you get to keep the fruits of your labor. That was the model that started America on its incredible ascent. This is the reason America is the richest country in the history of the world.
You also pointed out something, you know, Ronald Reagan came in, tax rates were high, the economy was in a mess. Well, you know all the stats, but in any event, you indicated that something happened and it put us on a trajectory of 25 years of absolutely incredible prosperity. Tell us about it.
Well, this was not just the policy of Ronald Reagan, but it was also the policy, interestingly enough, Pat, of John F. Kennedy. When he came into office, Kennedy cut tax rates by 30% across the board. We had a big economic boom in the 1960s as a result, and Ronald Reagan imitated that model that Kennedy had used so effectively. So Reagan came in and cut the rates. Remember, when Ronald Reagan first came into office, the highest tax rate in this country was 70%. It's hard to believe that we had that dysfunctional a policy. That meant the government got to take two-thirds of everything that you earned. Reagan cut that tax rate from 70% down to 50%, and then a few years later, all the way down to 28%. That's an enormous economic achievement. And the economy, as you know, Pat, it boomed. It absolutely boomed when that policy went into place. That and deregulating the economy, and Reagan had a disposition to allow the free enterprise system to work. That's very different, by the way, than what Barack Obama is saying, where he says everybody's going to play by the same rules. This is crazy. I mean, we obviously have rules by which you play by. That's one of the centerpieces of the free enterprise system, that there's a rule of law that everyone has to play by those rules. But you don't want to over-regulate and suffocate these businesses. I saw your excellent expose on that business that doesn't want to have to comply with Obamacare. Yeah, Obamacare is going to be a major job killer of every business in this country because it's going to impose all these additional costs every time you hire an additional worker, Pat. It's a real problem for the economy.
There was a story in the Journal today about the restriction on drilling in Alaska, a great big wilderness area, and the government says, no, Obama's trying to take credit for the oil and gas boom, which he had nothing to do with. But what are they doing? How are they restricting us?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. One of the great stories with the American economy over the last 5 or 6 years has been the oil and gas boom that's going on in this country, Pat. It's going on everywhere. It's going on in West Virginia. It's going on in Pennsylvania. It's going on in states like North Dakota and Colorado. I mean, we are blessed as a country with the most energy resources of any nation in the world with our coal and natural gas and oil. Unfortunately, President Obama doesn't like fossil fuels, right? And so everything that the president is doing is trying to hold back this revolution in energy policy that's going on in the United States with respect to these resources like natural gas. And so what President Obama and his administration did back in August, and it hardly got any attention from the mainstream media, was that he took 11 million acres off of development that is supposed to be a national petroleum reserve that's supposed to be used for drilling so that we're less dependent on foreign oil. And the administration said, you know, this is off limits now. This is a real problem for the country and also for the state of Alaska, which depends on those oil revenues to pay its bills.
he lies a lot. Do you think the people are going to buy it? There's an election coming up. You think the people are listening to what you're saying?
You know, I do. I have faith in the common sense of the American people, Pat, and I know you do too. And I think Americans realize that what's happened over the last 4 years has not worked. Look, I think Barack Obama really believed these policies would work. I don't believe that he has ill will. I think he really thought this more socialistic model would work. But we all now know that it has not worked. And as much as we wanted this president to succeed, he has not succeeded. And the economy is not, in my opinion, moving forward, Pat. It's moving backwards. I mean, as Paul Ryan said the other night in the debate, you know, the economy grew slower this year than it did last year, and it grew slower last year than it did the year before. That's not moving forward. That's moving backward.
That's right. Stephen Moore, thank you so much. It's called Who's the Fairest of Them All? Do you hear about fair tax? Is this fair? Are you paying enough income? Is it fair? I mean, who decides what fair is? And this talks about what's fair and what isn't. But thank you so much, Stephen. You're a good guy. Appreciate what you have to say.
Thank you, Pat. Can I say one last thing? You were never going to get me to jump out of an airplane or go on a tightrope over Niagara Falls.
Thank goodness. Wisdom prevails over all.